An author from this people wrote a poem often translated as Song of the Flight that is included in a collection of ballads of the lords. Another author imagines someone who, quote, lived in our basement and sacrificed my parents, unquote, as a member of this people in a 2012 poetry collection about her meth-addicted brother. That collection is titled When My Brother Was One of These People. These people inspired the title of a poem that repeats, a tree that is firmly rooted and that dances, and ends with, a river that goes curving, advances and retreats, arriving forever. A poet from this empire wrote flower songs and had a name meaning hungry coyote. This empire's calendar inspired the 584-line structure of the poem Sunstone by Octavio Paz. For 10 points, what empire's ruler Nezahualcóyotl wrote poems in Nahuatl? And the answer is Aztec. In The Body of Myth, J. Nigro Sansonesi argued one of these objects was analogized to the heart in a trance-like ritual in which the kisti box was analogized to the skull. Side, a wife of Orion, was named for these objects in a pairing that mythographers connect to an annual time when the Orion constellation was high. Terracotta pine cones, poppy seeds, and these objects were offered to Hera at Samos. For revealing an incident with one of these objects, Ascalaphus was turned into a lizard. Ancient Egyptians drank barley beer mixed with the juice of this fruit to celebrate the subdual of Sekhmet. This fruit was slipped into the hand of a goddess worshipped as Kore at the Eleusinian Mysteries. For 10 points, name this fruit of the dead whose consumption bound Persephone to the underworld. And the answer is pomegranate. This non-French ruler was opposed by the Citizens Committee of Public Safety. This ruler resided in Washington Place, which was established by the family of John Owen Dominus. This ruler faced a vote of no confidence after signing bills that created licensing for the sale of opium and a lottery system in response to an 1890 tariff. After visiting Queen Victoria during a world tour, this ruler wrote the song The Queen's Jubilee. A rebellion in support of restoring this ruler to power was led by Robert Wilcox. The Blount Report ruled that the overthrow of this ruler was illegal after she was targeted for opposing her predecessor's signing of the Bayonet Constitution. For 10 points, name this queen who was overthrown by American-backed forces in 1893, the final queen of Hawaii. And the answer is Queen Liliuokalani. 2 answers required. In a 2008 Nature paper, Strukov, Snyder, Stewart, and Williams reported a device that exhibits double loops on a plot of these two quantities by sandwiching a thin semiconductor film with doped and undoped regions between two metal contacts. The ratio of the output value of one of these quantities to the input value of the other gives a quantity denoted lowercase g sub m. The x-intercept on a plot of these two quantities gives the strength of the Early effect. On plots of these two quantities, memristors display hystereses. These two quantities are plotted on transistors' characteristic curves. The product of these two quantities is the power radiated by a resistor. For 10 points, name these two quantities whose ratio is resistance by Ohm's law. And the answer is current and voltage. The owner of an artwork made with this substance split it into two pieces by setting it on fire. One of those pieces is now located at the Palace Museum. In 1999, James Cahill controversially claimed that an artwork in the Met made with this substance was a forgery created by a much later artist. An artist who primarily worked with this substance was known as Madman for paintings of a poet strolling and the drunken celestial. A master of painting with this substance created an artwork depicting 6 persimmons. Josetsu was known as the father of Japanese paintings made with this substance, which was used for paintings of mountains and rivers by the Shan Shui school. Chinese scrolls were often painted with, for 10 points, what substance also used to make calligraphy. And the answer is ink. When asked how old he is, a man in this novel forgets his age and rambles on about 28 kinds of fish sauce. A man in this novel describes a group's barbaric lavishness with time to a man he calls engineer, who considers time spacious before him while wrapped in camel hair blankets. A woman in this novel slams a door at the same time each day en route to the good Russian table. Her Kyrgyz eyes remind a man of his childhood crush. In this novel, a man is told that we up here do not use such a small unit of time as the week by Settembrini. This novel's protagonist goes to visit his cousin Joachim for 3 weeks, but falls in love with Claudia Cauchet and stays for 7 years. For 10 points, name this Thomas Mann novel about Hans Castorp's stay in a sanatorium. And the answer is The Magic Mountain. Michael E. Porter argued that this concept is outmoded by citing Korea's Miracle on the Han River and proposed replacing it with a diamond of 4 national determinants. The parameter theta that governs this concept is countered by geographic barriers in a paper by Eaton and Kortum that builds on Dornbusch, Fisher, and Samuelson's continuum model. Robert Torrens proposed an early form of this concept in an 1815 essay on Polish corn. Different relative proportions of factor endowments led to this concept in the Heckscher-Ohlin model. This concept was numerically formulated using Portuguese wine and English cloth by David Ricardo. For 10 points, what concept holds that production efficiency is maximized by trading goods with the lowest opportunity cost, even without an absolute advantage? And the answer is comparative advantage. A possible rerun of this event is linked to climate change in Africa and the second globalization in the book Black Earth. The term commemorative causality warns how the eventual study of this event will reflect only contemporary emotions, according to Timothy Snyder. A Daniel Goldhagen book revived debate over interpretations of this event presented by Andreas Hillgruber and Ernst Nolte during the Historians' Quarrel. Christopher Browning places blame for this event on those in positions of power while excusing the title ordinary men. The trial of the architect of this event is discussed in a book subtitled The Banality of Evil and written by Hannah Arendt. For 10 points, name this event discussed in Hitler's Willing Executioners, the goal of the final solution. And the answer is the Holocaust. An algorithm for analyzing this type of data uses bidirectional transformer encoders with 15% of the input masked, similar to a closed task. A bidirectional LSTM architecture is used to analyze this type of data in the Elmo algorithm, which preceded an algorithm for this type of data called BERT. A representation of this type of data is constructed by performing singular value decomposition on a matrix of TF-IDF values. This type of data can be embedded into a space of feature vectors using a skip-gram model. Assessing the polarity of this type of data is a rudimentary task in sentiment analysis. This type of data is generated by the GPT-3 model, which was trained on a massive corpus. For 10 points, NLP models operate on speech and what other type of language data? And the answer is text. This artist sings "I'm high and I'm feeling anxious" in the CVS as the guest artist on a track where she also repeats the chorus, "Life's so fun, got my mini skirt and my rollerblades on." This guest artist on Muna's track Silk Chiffon intones, "I'm strapped into a corset, climbed into your Corvette," on a duet with Conor Oberst inspired by the death of Dylan Thomas. This artist asks, "Why do you sing with an English accent?" on a song inspired by her breakup with Ryan Adams. This female half of the duo Better Oblivion Community Center smashed her guitar during a 2021 performance on SNL. This artist appears in a skeleton costume on the cover of a 2020 album that features the songs Graceland 2 and Kyoto. For 10 points, name this artist of the album Punisher. And the answer is Phoebe Bridgers. F-Mach FF transitions from flat ribbons to this type of material as pH rises above 6.4. The Stuber process uses this type of material to produce uniformly sized silicon dioxide particles. These materials form when cross-linking results in molecular mass diverging according to the Flory-Stockmyer theory. Thin films can be produced by depositing a colloid and allowing monomers to coalesce into this type of material as the coating dries in the this material process. A subtype of these materials, termed frozen smoke, has extremely low density. That aeroform of these materials has gas as the dispersed fluid phase. A network of polymers or other solids provides structure to, for 10 points, what semisolids exemplified by the agarose matrix used in electrophoresis. And the answer is gel. A character in this story hears a sound like, quote, "a chorus of frogs on a spring evening," unquote, or "people laughing at you behind your back," after touching a 5-year payment received up front. That woman in this story has a hard little place at the center of her heart after she married for love and the love turned to dust. This story's protagonist forms a financial partnership with the gardener Bassett, which his uncle Oscar later joins. A house in this story is haunted by the unspoken phrase, "there must be more money." The protagonist of this story exclaims, "It's Malabar," before passing out, and tells his mother, "I am lucky," before dying. For 10 points, name this story in which Paul predicts the winner of races by writing the title Toy, written by D.H. Lawrence. And the answer is the Rocking Horse winner. In this state, Bill and Vonette Bright founded Campus Crusade for Christ, which later rebranded into the campus organization Crew. While living in this state, the neo-pagan author Starhawk wrote the foundational text of the goddess movement, the Spiral Dance. The most successful of the human potential movement's grow centers was this state's Esalen Institute. The Neo-Zoroastrian Mazdaznan movement is based in this state, which has the largest population of Zoroastrians outside of Iran and India. The African-American preacher William J. Seymour led a racially integrated charismatic movement in this state, where Amy Semple McPherson founded the Foursquare Church. The Azusa Street revival took place in, for 10 points, what state where many Scientologist celebrities live in Beverly Hills? And the answer is California. This modern-day country contained whispering columns at a temple of Artemis and a mosaic studio at the house of the Tesserae in a Decapolis city preserved by a 749 CE earthquake. PPNB residents of this country raised goats in Beidha and made plaster human statues in Ein Guzzle. In 2021, Alan West's Comet Research Group dubiously argued that a Tunguska-like airburst melted this country's site of Tal el Hammam, inspiring accounts of Sodom. This country contains Jerish, Byzantine mosaics in Madaba, and Roman Philadelphia. Aratus IV built this country's Temple of the Winged Lions and Al-Khazne behind the Sikh Gorge. Johann Ludwig Burckhardt visited the treasury north of this country's Wadi Rum in a rock-cut Nabatean city. For 10 points, what country contains Petra and the citadel of Amman? And the answer is Jordan. This artist photographed twin boys next to a sign reading, "Please keep off the grass." Bonnie Jockelson chronicled this photographer's amateur assistance in a 2007 book titled Rediscovering Him. This photographer accidentally lit himself on fire with magnesium powder while pioneering indoor flash photography. This artist often photographed growler gangs of boys that he dubbed street Arabs. This photographer frequently titled photos for their cost in cents, such as one of a man sleeping on a mattress on top of 2 barrels. Clotheslines in this artist's photos of bandits' roosts and other Mulberry Street locations represent the poverty line. For 10 points, name this Danish-American artist who photographed tenements for his collection How the Other Half Lives. And the answer is Jacob Riis. In this city, the one-eyed Simeon Brown falls in love with the Holocaust survivor Maria in the novel The Stoneface. Life is described as occurring underwater in a location in this city with windows painted white in lieu of curtains. A novel set primarily in this city opens with the narrator describing the night which is leading him to the most terrible morning of his life. At the end of a novel, the character who lives in this city asks a woman, "Isn't it pretty to think so?" A character who titles a novel primarily set in this city strangles his former boss after a gay affair with the American man David Enns. This city is the primary setting of James Baldwin's novel Giovanni's Room. For 10 points, name this city that Ernest Hemingway described in his memoir A Movable Feast. And the answer is Paris. A 3rd century CE thinker with this name inspired a school of Renaissance philosophers led by Pietro Pomponazzi, which feuded over the immortality of the soul with the Averroes like Agostino Nifo. That man from Aphrodisias was nicknamed the Commentator. A man with this name was the purported addressee of a letter that circulated in the Middle Ages and influenced Roger Bacon, called the Secretum Secretorum. A man with this name was the most famous student of a philosopher whose other students, like Theophrastus, were called Peripatetics. Diogenes of Sinope once asked that famous man of this name to move out of his sunlight. A military leader with this name sent donations to his teacher's school, the Lyceum. For 10 points, give this name of a ruler who was tutored by Aristotle. And the answer is Alexander. In 1987, The elections empowered a president of this ethnicity from the Progressive Reform Party until he was dismissed in the telephone coup by the leader who ordered the December murders. After 1834, 450,000 immigrants of this ethnicity entered a depot in True Fanfaron in the Great Experiment. In 1953, Britain overthrew a socialist father of the nation of this ethnicity who broke with the rival PPP leader Forbes Burnham. This ethnicity created foods like doubles in the Caribbean, where they mixed with Africans to form the Dougla people. This largest ethnic group in Mauritius, Suriname, Guyana, and Trinidad included sugar-growing Jahajis and Girmitias, who, like the Chinese, were often indentured laborers. For 10 points, what ethnicity's diaspora is called Desi? And the answer is Indians. A post-minimalist album with this adjective in its title features excerpts of Czesław Miłosz, read by Tilda Swinton over viola and electronics on its track Shadow Journal. In a piece with this adjective in its title, a flute and clarinet represent the composer and her brother Andrew, who died of skin cancer. The song On the Nature of Daylight appears on a Max Richter album in which this adjective describes notebooks. This adjective describes a cathedral in the title of a Jennifer Higdon piece. This adjective appears in the title of a jazz-inspired piece whose 5 main themes were inspired by a train ride after its composer was convinced to compose a work for Paul Whiteman's An Experiment in Modern Music. A clarinet glissando opens, for 10 points, a George Gershwin Rhapsody in what color? And the answer is blue. Clay Armstrong injected these organisms with ammonium salts to determine how blocking affects inactivation rates. These model organisms replaced Nitella after K.S. Cole measured their rectification curves at Woods Hole. In these organisms, Rodolfo Ginas discovered microdomains of increased calcium in presynaptic terminals. A species of these organisms creates circadian counterillumination camouflage by expelling symbionts that perform Lux-I, Lux-R quorum sensing. Margaret McFall-Gnei found that the light organ of a Hawaiian species of these animals supports bioluminescent Alivrio fisheri. The patch clamp technique derives from studies of these animals' giant axons, whose action potentials underlie the Hodgkin-Huxley model. For 10 points, name these 2 tentacled, color-changing, ink-ejecting cephalopods. And the answer is squid.